This may be one of the best opening lines for a news article I have ever read. The Daily News reports LeBron James tests positive for COVID-19, will miss several games, according to reports. You ready for this one? Not even the king is immune to COVID-19. Okay. When I was getting vaccinated to travel the world, I was told that I had to get immunized. They say you have to get immunized or inoculated or vaccinated, but they really didn't say vaccinated. So I'm at the office. I was at Vice, and we had this security protocol meeting, and I was told I needed to get immunized from a few different potential viruses, notably yellow fever if you're traveling to Venezuela. And that's how they said it. Like, you know, you need to go get your yellow fever shot and get immunized, blah, blah, blah. Immunized. Was that the wrong word? Were we just poor, dumb yokels, but 10 years ago? They say not even the king is immune to COVID-19, but LeBron James claims to be fully vaccinated against the virus. So I get it. You know, YouTube threatens to ban people who talk about, who claim that there's low efficacy towards the vaccines. But think about the insanity of the world that we're in, where YouTube says you can't claim, it legit says you can't claim that the vaccines are less effective or anything like that. And then we have a news article saying not even the king is immune to COVID-19, but he is fully vaccinated. So they're straight up saying the vaccine does not give you immunity. He's not. Okay. Maybe this is Fauci's Omicron or whatever. Or look, I'm not here to give anybody medical advice. I'm just here to be bewildered. Same as you. And that's enough for me. All right, I'll put it this way. You go talk to your doctor. You figure out what makes sense for you. But I think this is a very important point. You have there's a Jimmy Carr, I think his name is. He made apparently a lot of people are mad at him because he made a joke where he insulted people who don't want to get the vaccine. And I'm like, if people are bewildered because you see stories about not even the king is immune to COVID-19, but he is fully vaccinated, what's the issue? The issue, I suppose, is we have new variants. The variants have different levels of infectivity. And I guess the CEO of Moderna was saying that they're not going to have an Omicron vaccine for some time. Pfizer was saying their vaccine should be good. But if COVID is this new kind of very potent and powerful virus, because I've had it and it was something else. It was powerful, man. Don't underestimate it. And it keeps mutating. I mean, it's endemic, right? So the news here, I'm not, somebody who watches the NBA or follows that stuff for the most part, but this is fairly big news. I mean, this is LeBron James. James, who has said he is fully vaccinated against the virus, will miss several games, according to ESPN. According to NBA rules, players must test negative on 2 separate days before they can be cleared to return. Players who test positive must sit out 10 days. You know what the craziest thing about this story is? Google it. And you know what you see? All of the headlines are, LeBron James will miss several games due to COVID protocols. And I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Okay. And then I find one, here we go. Daily News at least had the balls to say it. Tests positive for COVID-19. Instead, they're just like, oh, take a look at this. Dan Bongino. This is from the Colorado Springs Gazette. Dan Bongino infected with painful breakthrough case of COVID-19, one of the worst things I've ever experienced. He says, quote, so I had COVID. You know my vaccine history. I've spoken about it. It was obviously a breakthrough case. It was not a mild case. It was actually a pretty painful case. So I don't know what the other cases are. These breakthrough cases, I can't speak to them. I can only speak for myself. It was not a mild case. It was a pretty awful case. But he goes on to say, I'm not a doctor. I worked with a doctor, though. I took the antibodies, the monoclonal antibodies, and I can tell you within 36 hours, I felt better. I also took ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, zinc, vitamin D, vitamin C. I'm not going to correlate or make casual inferences about any of that. The breakthrough case for me was not mild at all. It was one of the worst things I've ever experienced. Well, I also had COVID. I also received I didn't get hydroxychloroquine. I got ivermectin. I got azithromycin. I got monoclonal antibodies, a vitamin drip, and NAD. And I was better within 12 hours or so. But it was painful. Not the most painful thing I've ever experienced. Second most. And I really mean it. It's surprising, too, because I'll talk to people and we'll have guests here on the show. We'll have their crew, and I'll say this, and they'll be like, what? I had people commenting when I said this saying, they're like, wow, Tim must be morbidly obese or something. And I'm like, no, I don't know. I'm part Asian, and they say that Asians have more ACE2 receptors. Maybe that was a factor. I don't know. Dan Bongino said he had a really bad case. But let me tell you, about 10 years ago, I was overseas, and one of my wisdom teeth got infected. I mean, this is a thing that happens, kind of gross. And so when I got back, it was, swollen, and I went to the dentist or the orthodontist or whatever, and they were like, we're going to have to, pull that out and then, give you antibiotics. And they did. That was the most painful thing I have ever experienced. Not the removal, but after it was removed, I was pale, sweating profusely, and just shaking on my friend's couch. And all the painkillers they gave me did nothing. I was like rocking back and forth. Every minute was just clicking by as slow could be. That was the most excruciating thing I've ever experienced. I've also had a kidney stone. And yeah, painful. Yeah, it was painful. People don't understand this. Kidney stones are when when from your kidney in your ureter or whatever how you pronounce it, is when there's blockage. So it feels like appendicitis. People don't understand. They think it comes out your urethra or whatever. We're getting gross here. But my point is, when I had COVID, this is now almost 2 months ago or a month and a half ago, it was the second most painful thing I've gone through in my life. And I literally mean that. And that's why I'm very serious about you gotta find a doctor that you trust. You got to find a doctor that you got to talk to a doctor, and take this stuff seriously. I don't know what's going on with this Omicron thing. They're saying that it's more infectious. It's not as bad. It may be worse. We don't know. What's happening with these variants is that the more extreme strains of COVID are basically, what's the right word? They're having trouble spreading because they're too extreme. So like whatever it is I got, and I tested positive and all that stuff, I didn't go anywhere. I was basically locked down. And because of that, I couldn't spread it to anybody. But when people get these more transmissible, lighter strains and they don't notice, or they just have the sniffles, then they might go to a party and not realize it. Then they might go to the movies and spread it. Maybe they have the sniffles and don't think twice. No reason to get a test if you just sneezed a couple times. So what happens is new strains emerge that are much less deadly over time because the deadly ones don't transmit properly. But I will say, I can't speak to why fully vaccinated LeBron James is the king who is not immune from COVID. I suppose you got to get your booster shot. That's what they're saying. So look, don't take it from me. Do what you think is right for your health and talk to your doctor. But even Dan Bongino, who's fully vaccinated, also got it. Well, let me show you the article from the Daily Beast. We screwed up. This is really a 3-dose vaccine. I've talked about this several times. This may be one of the most important stories, in my opinion. Global studies are showing that a third jab is not a booster. It's an essential element of the vaccination. And we shouldn't have given the first 2 doses so close together. Well, far be it from me to trust the word of the Daily Beast because they're not doctors. But you can see where the narrative is going. And now, Dr. Fauci has a new narrative for us. Fauci says Omicron may not be a big deal, but the U.S. should prepare for the worst. And we are. Because of Omicron, Joe Biden is now implementing new travel restrictions, or trying to. The courts are striking down his vax mandates. And the cultist Democrat establishment people are livid. I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to show you this. We have this tweet from this guy, Jeff Kemp. Actually, hold on. We have a story from Politico. Biden will lay down new travel restrictions as Omicron threatens. A tightened testing window will be part of the administration's attempt to curb the spread of the virus ahead of another holiday travel period. Okay, now we'll go to this tweet first from Anthony LaMesa, who said, "This is what the Biden administration wants to demand from fully vaccinated and boosted travelers. Are you kidding me?" It says, as part of enhanced winter COVID strategy, Biden plans to announce on Thursday U.S. officials will require everyone entering the country to be tested 1 day before boarding flights, regardless of their vaccination status or country of departure. Administration officials are also considering a requirement that all travelers get retested within 3 to 5 days of arrival. In addition, they are debating a controversial proposal to require all travelers, including U.S. citizens, to self-quarantine for 7 days, even if their test results are negative. Those who flout the requirements might be subject to fines and penalties. The first time such penalties would be linked to testing and quarantine measures for travelers in the United States. Jeff Kemp says, "This is nonsense. I decided to get vaccinated plus the booster. I shouldn't be treated the same as the people out there depending on prayer, good luck, and dewormer. I'm going to raise holy hell if Biden lands here. You going to cry about it? What are you going to do? You going to cry about it? You vote for Joe Biden? Did you agree with everything they've been saying? Did you get on board? Oh, no, now you're shocked to find that you're going to be treated the same as the dewormer people? Oh, wow. Surprise, as if no one saw that coming. The Daily Beast straight up says it's a 3-dose vaccine. So no, Mr. Kemp, you are not boosted. You barely have full vaccination. And just give it time. Eventually they'll say, you know what? Turns out it's a 4-dose vaccine. Look, if you want to get the vaccine like Dan Bongino or a bunch of the guests that we've had, it's up to you. It's up to you. I mean, I think I believe the data. A lot of people, we have a problem when it comes to large scale endeavors where people don't understand percentages. So when it comes to the adverse events coming from vaccines and potential breakthrough cases, you need to understand that if you have 330 million people and we administer, 170 vaccinations, double doses, that out of 170 million, if the margin of failure is, 0.1%, that's going to be a lot of stories. And is 0.1% tolerable? What I'm saying is this. I don't know or care, and I am sick of scientific arguments from people who don't know anything about it. It really does annoy me because we don't need to be having that argument at all. It's a distraction. People coming out and saying, I argued with Joe a bit about it. Joe Rogan, when he was, on his show, and he's saying, like, we should take into consideration natural immunity. And I'm like, why are we even having an argument the extent to which we're willing to accept government mandates on this? Well, it's a non-issue for me. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. I don't know, man. I can read articles. I can choose to trust or distrust them. Now, I'll tell you, it is bewildering when Lebron James and Dan Bongino, both fully vaccinated, get breakthrough cases. But it's also possible that breakthrough cases happen. And maybe, like I said, if you have 170 million people who are vaccinated, you're going to get these cases. And sometimes those cases will be high profile. I'll put it this way. It's irrelevant. To me, is irrelevant. What matters is that we should be saying there is no circumstance by which we allow the government to mandate a medical procedure. Have a nice day. Sorry. Look, they can say public institutions that are under local control can vote for how they want this to operate. Private institutions within reason can decide how they want to operate. But saying that you must undergo an irreversible medical procedure, I don't care what it is. I literally don't care. You can come to me and say, but we need to get everyone vaccinated. And I'll be like, it's not your decision to inject someone with something. It's them and their doctor. And you can say, we need to make sure that, everybody, whatever, has cybernetic legs so they can jump higher. Look, there's a really great line from Star Trek: The Next Generation. And you want to understand where my views on this comes from. This is probably a really good point. Seriously, if you haven't watched that show, maybe you won't like it, whatever. But Data, he's an android. He's not human. And he's talking to Geordi LaForge, an engineer. Geordi is blind, and he has a cybernetic visor that allows him to see better than any human. And Data, I believe, I could be, the gist of the story goes like this. He says to Geordi, are your eyes superior, your prosthetic eyes superior to that of a normal human or to any other human? And he says, well, yes, of course. I can see, infrared. I can see X-ray. He can see, this cybernetic allows him to see beyond the visible spectrum. And Data says, then why is it not required that all humans get their eyes replaced with this? And it's a really good point. In the show, there's points where like Geordi gets his vision back, or like they talk about potential treatment, and he's like, this is who I am. Think about where we go today if we say the government can mandate medical procedures. Yeah. They'll come out with new prosthetic eyes that see better, and they'll say, look, driving is a privilege. Too many people have bad human eyes, and human natural eyes are too weak, and we don't want the risk. So undergo your eye cyberization. Otherwise, you don't get to drive. I mean, seriously, that's where we could be headed. I know it's far-fetched. It's a science fiction idea. But where we're at right now is them literally saying you cannot enter a restaurant unless you get an injection to stimulate your immune system against a particular virus. Keeps mutating, and they blame the people who aren't getting the vaccine, but most people aren't getting the vaccine don't live in big cities anyway. So I don't know. Look, it's simple. I'm a scientist or a doctor. I can't give that advice. I can tell you, if we come to a world where they invent amazing cybernetic prosthetics, where we've already seen some really amazing stuff, robot hands, and now they're talking about these devices that can act as a bridge between the brain and the broken spinal cord. So if you're paralyzed from like the waist down, they can attach this device that sends a signal over and you can walk again. And once they build something like that, and they say, we've discovered that the cyber spine has a 81% increased efficacy in neurotransmission. Then they'll say, a lot of people trip and fall. A lot of people fall downstairs. People should be mandated to get this treatment, and it's no big deal. Why not? Everyone has some kind of cybernetic. No. You can't do it. You can't do it. And the courts have agreed. Take a look at this. Courts block 2 Biden administration COVID vaccine mandates. This is from just the other day. The Biden administration was blocked on Tuesday from enforcing 2 mandates requiring millions of American workers to get vaccinated against COVID-19. U.S. District Judge Terry Doty in Monroe, Louisiana, temporarily blocked the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services from enforcing its vaccine mandate on healthcare workers until the court can resolve legal challenges. The ruling applies to 10 states where CMS was already prevented from enforcing the rule due to a prior order from a federal judge in St. Louis. Doty said the CMS lacked the authority to issue a vaccine mandate that would require more than 2 million unvaccinated healthcare workers to get a coronavirus shot. In Sweden, there's already a video of them injecting RFID chips into people's hands so that they can have their identification, their COVID passport. Let's put it this way. There's a great episode of, what show is it? It's not Black Mirror. Maybe it's Tales from the Loop. Have you ever watched that show? I can't remember. Maybe you guys know. Comment below if you know this one. It's, there's people who live in isolated, like, lower technology areas where they've escaped the big cities. And the cities are all under this, a system where you have to have this device you wear on your wrist that tracks you at all times. You can't get food without it. They have to make you wear an armband if you don't have it and stuff like that. Alex Jones, I remember him talking about, 15 years ago, Verichip. And there were a lot of people that thought it would be cool to get a small RFID chip implanted in their hand, like right here between the thumb. And what they were doing with it was it had your employee identification on it, and it allowed you to open doors. It was effectively a key fob. I don't understand the point of injecting a chip into my hand when I can literally get a little tiny piece of plastic, RFID, and put it in my pocket instead. And if you don't have it, the door don't open. Is it that complicated? And then they can just clone a fob and hand it to you. There's no reason to inject it. A video came out of Sweden where people were really excited, being trendy, and they pull up the skin and then they take this very thick needle and stick it in and inject a chip that has your vaccine passport information under the pretext of crime. Under the pretext of, underage drinking or identity theft. They say, look, we are dealing with a pandemic of cybercrime and criminal behavior. And these criminals who commit these crimes, it's hard to track. We need to be able to know for sure if people are lying to us. Because when we arrested that guy, he said his name was John Smith, but his name was actually John Doe. If you want to enter the business, you gotta get your chip. I don't believe that will happen. I think the problem with the RFID thing is it's too invasive and hard to do, but it's not out of the realm of possibility if we allow the government to mandate medical procedures. Eventually, it'll be normal. I was talking to my mom recently. I've talked about this. My grandpa, I remember him telling me that when they introduced Social Security numbers, him and his friends were freaking out. Like, the government wants to give us numbers? Like, we're going to have a registered number with the government? What's that all about? And then he was like, you were born with it. You don't even care. You never talk about it. You don't protest it. It's a normal part of your life. And I was like, yep, I don't care. I don't even think about it, to be honest. But he was like, this is not good. And now here we are. So what'll happen with these mandates, medical mandates? Eventually, or I'll go back. Real quick. You know, my mom was telling me that in the 80s, I guess, you wouldn't get your Social Security number until you were trying to get your job. You're 16, you'd go and fill out the form, get your number, and then you can go get a job. And now it's basically when you're born, you get it. You have your registration number with the government. That's reality. Nobody protests that. Kids are going to grow up and they're not going to care. Like I don't think about it. You probably don't think about it, right? So what happens next? Chips. I mean, you're going to be born and they're going to say, we're going to put a chip in the hand for tracking his personal medical history. It'll keep him safe. It'll allow us to identify him. He'll never have to go to the DMV ever again. Think about that. No more waiting in long lines, but it's important for your safety. And the parents are going to be like, I want to do it. I want to do it. And then the kids will grow up with their chip in their hand and they'll not think twice. I'm not entirely convinced it'll happen with chips. I think chips are kind of an old school idea. We used to be like, in the future, they'll microchip you. No, I don't think so. We already carry around our cell phones, which has everything on it. In reality, I think what'll happen is they'll put your app on your phone. Nobody wants to be without their phone. Nobody needs to get microchipped or anything weird like that. People willfully carry around their device that tracks them everywhere they go. I do it, you do it, we all do it, and we love it. It's great, isn't it? The cyberization is happening. So I can't tell you about vaccines or whatever. I can only tell you about your rights. I can't tell you about any medical procedures you should take because I'm not a doctor. I can only tell you about your rights. And what bothers me about the whole, vaccine debate is that my position is squarely coming from a principle liberty point of view. It is not the government's right, nor do they have the ability to bar you from public accommodation unless you undergo a medical procedure they think you should get. Well, you're not my doctor, government, and you have people who can't get it because they have underlying conditions. Too bad, that's a reality. And thus, we don't discriminate against them. At least we're not supposed to. They are. So the issue I take is, you read these stories, I don't know, it's up to you to figure out what you want to believe. But my issue is just let people choose. And I think too many people on the liberty side are having an argument about science, and it's so easy to debunk. Some libertarian will come out and be like, we got to talk about natural immunity and the vaccine passports. And then someone will be like, did you read the new study from so-and-so and which? And they're going to go, no. And I'm like, aha. And I'm just going to be like, I didn't read that study and I don't need to tell you the government should be mandating medical procedures. Next. You know, this reminds me of the Jack Dorsey thing when I was on with Jack and Joe on Twitter, on Joe Rogan's show talking about Twitter. And everyone, I guess, assumed that I was going to be this typical guy who'd shut up and be like, why'd you ban Alex Jones? And we did talk about them banning Alex Jones and Milo Yiannopoulos and things like that, and Carl Benjamin, and we talked about those issues. But what they did not expect was for me to get into the core principle of the issue. Your rules are biased. Your perspective on what misgendering is does not apply to more than half the country, probably 80% of the country. So when you say you can't misgender, you're confusing most people. They weren't ready for that. They just went, it's true. Conservatives don't agree with their definition. I don't care for the stupid cliche, whatever mainstream argument about, Rand Paul is like natural immunity. And I'm like, I don't care. I don't care if you have natural immunity because I think it's dumb to be like, I'm going to get COVID to prevent COVID. That's stupid. If you don't want to get COVID, talk to a doctor and maybe you want to get vaccinated several times. Okay, it's up to you. I don't know. I'll tell you this. Ain't nobody gonna come to me and be like, inject this. Not going to happen. In fact, if you come to me and say that, I'm more likely to say no. So I went to a cafe the other day and they had a big old sign on the door saying, please wear a mask upon entry. And I was like, looked behind me, there's a Starbucks. And I said, nope, no, it's Starbucks. Walked up and there it was on the door. Nothing. It was a Christmas advertisement or something. I don't know. Get 25% off. I don't know what it said. I don't even remember. And I walked in. Nobody was wearing masks. The workers were, but they didn't care what I did. And I was like, there you go. Look, if you want to have these things on your business, I'm free to go somewhere else. A private business, I think, has, a certain amount of rights. But I do believe in public accommodation. That's where the government should not be discriminating against people. By all means, have all the scientific arguments you want. Explain away why it is you think the king is not immune from COVID when he's got 2 vaccines. I don't know. All I know is I think The government should mandate it. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.